Greetings, it's Matt Fields, your write-in candidate for governor for the state of Utah. I don't know if there's anyone else that's a write-in candidate that is actively promoting as I am, or at least attempting to. Maybe I'm wrong, but I mean, unless you're listening to this, you probably still don't know who I am anyway. The fact of the matter is that we have a political system that benefits two parties only, right? Either you're a Democrat or you're a Republican. The interesting thing is that they have, not only do they have those advantages of that power structure in general and being able to put together large groups that support them because they have many registered Republicans across Utah and actually across the United States too. It's not that they don't get any benefit from them either. It's the same thing with the Democrats here in the state of Utah. They have organization. As an unaffiliated, you do not have any organization. And that's really the only way in which you would be on a level playing ground field, is if everybody was on the same level in that sense. And that's why when I talk about corruption, one of the things that we have to do is eliminate parties. And if you don't agree with that, then you should probably read some of the words that George Washington has said about that, because he says that they would usurp the power of the people, which I believe they already have. In addition to that, parties have the tendency to push out anyone that isn't kind of in their corner. They're not super interested in new ideas. And you can see that just in their voting practices, right? You can't, if you're unaffiliated like I am, you can't vote in any. I think you can vote in Democrat primaries, but you can't vote in Republican primaries. And when I tried to present before other Republicans, they wouldn't permit me to do that. So it's a very tight-knit club. You have to be a member of that club, otherwise it's not going to make any difference whatsoever how great your proposal might be. And I would argue, granted, I'm the one that wrote it, but I believe I'm the only one that has this comprehensive proposal, as I do, of anyone in the state of Utah that's running for office. I could be wrong, but you'd be hard pressed to find someone who's written as comprehensive as I have in my book/proposal. Again, go to govmat.org and you can check out that proposal for free. I also have another book there called Living the Fabled Tale, The Emperor's New Clothes, which is also for free, that you can read. It kind of gives you an additional perspective associated with what's been happening over the last few years. But I come to you today not just to talk about the issues associated with just the parties in general and the corruption that exists in the state of Utah, whether or not you decide to believe it. I am here to talk a little bit more about Verify Vote. Now, well, not more. It's probably the first time you've heard of this. And I mean, the last 2 weeks I haven't posted, and the reason I haven't, one, I was at a family reunion for one of those weeks, but the other one is I've been prepping for this. Verify Vote is a concept that I kind of allude to in my book/proposal. And it's basically the process of ensuring that you have the data that's necessary to verify your vote against the state record. Now, I don't really go into the detail I'm about to explain to you. I don't go into this kind of detail in my book because initially I'm running as a write-in because I wanted to ensure that there was some level of adjudication that took place in order for the teller to discern the actual vote. And so it's kind of put in a different pile. It's not the same as just running it through the machine, right? Which, by the way, if you haven't reviewed the 2022 audit, it's very difficult to review the 2020 audit for the state of Utah, but the 2022 audit, they actually went through and they made their own admissions, and I go through in detail each of those major problems, including issues specifically with chain of custody, which is a huge problem, and just the election process in general, in mailing out ballots, and how irregularly they update those records. So you theoretically could be receiving, for example, my folks, I am living at my folks' house. I'm super cool because we're building our house, but it'll be done hopefully shortly. But the reason I say that because my folks are on a mission and they received a ballot. Now, if you were going in for the primary to vote, you wouldn't have the opportunity to vote because you weren't there. right? But if I were a dishonest person and I wanted to make sure that I submitted a vote specifically for myself, really, then I could have easily filled out my folks' ballots and dropped them off, right? I mean, who's to say that that hasn't happened? There's no way to determine that. And so since we don't have a very effective system, and the proposed system that I would do is as follows, is you actually have to have people go to the polls, and they actually have to vote, right? And they do that by a verification process, a two-step verification process. One, when they enter, they have to provide their driver's license. On a closed system, the teller will then look and say, okay, your number is this, 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 this. You're here, right here in the system. You haven't voted, so click. This means that you are voting, and then you go, you vote, you verify that again on the ballot and place your driver's license number there as well. And then those ballots are made public record. Okay, people can verify driver's licenses, but they can't like look up a specific driver's license unless they're doing something nefarious. But ultimately, you'd be able to attach those two numbers together, and you'd have double verification there, to where people can go through and say, hey, this ballot is invalid because there is no secondary record of them coming in and registering with the teller initially before voting. And I know that there are some people who are like, well, what about those people that are homebound? Well, we can make accommodations for those people. They have to have a legitimate reason. They can't just say, I just want to vote from home. They have to say, I'm actually wheelchair bound. I can't leave the house, or, there's a myriad of other reasons that would be submitted, and then people would receive a ballot from their home or to their home. But I think that would be not via the post, but via just volunteers that have been essentially verified to do that work. And they would come, they would allow the person to vote, and then they would take that, maintaining the chain of custody all the way until it's received at City Hall. So that's the way to fix the current voting system, so that it enables honesty throughout the entire process. However, that doesn't exist in the state of Utah, unfortunately. And so what has to happen is there has to be a verification process somehow. And that's why I've put together Verify Vote, or vvote.org. We're in the process of building the website, and it's pretty simple. All you'll do is you'll get your ballot at home, you'll plug in your choices, and then you'll go to the website, vvote.org. You'll plug in your driver's license number, and then you'll permit us to collect your GPS, your metadata, your device information, and your timestamp when you take the picture of your ballot. And then there'd be a verification process, either like a CAPTCHA, something that Google does. You'd have to verify that you're actually a human, you're not a bot, and then it would be submitted to a secure database. Now, this is important for a myriad of reasons. One, hopefully it'll keep Utah honest. And two, if they aren't honest, and we are getting different results than what the state is getting, even if it's at a sample size level, then we can actually present that as evidence in court. Now, if you followed Phil Lyman at all in this process that he's taken in order to obtain the signatures that theoretically the Cox campaign has acquired, then you can begin to understand why this matters. Now, anyone that is opposing a concept of verification of a vote you're either just fighting for the team, or you think it's conspiratorial. Now, we already know that these sorts of things happen. If you haven't read my book, Living the Fable Tale of the Emperor's New Clothes, or listened to it, it's free. Again, you can listen to it for free. You can read it for free. It goes through the various things that took place. I can't remember which chapter it was. I think maybe it was chapter 7. But it talks about all the things that took place in the 2020 election. There are a myriad of serious anomalies that take place during that time that make no sense at all, and there's nobody to... In fact, if you review the actual data, you go to the website I provide in the book. I tell you exactly how you can do it and how you can compile the data. You'll find that there were 4 states, I believe, 4 states that had more than 100% of vote. That's not possible, obviously. It's the same thing when you review And then I think there's 5 other states that have almost 100% of registered voters. Okay, so these things aren't possible. Definitely not possible to have 4 states with more than 100% of the vote. And again, this isn't conjecture, this isn't conspiracy, this isn't anything. This is literally just comparing the number of registered voters against the number of votes. That's it. That's all. And it shows that there are more than 100%. And that's not possible. So there's obviously an issue to one degree or another. And again, if you review the state audit of 2022 elections, you'll find that they have some of their own issues that they readily admit. And that's one, and these are the problems. And so anyone that would be opposed to verify vote in any way, shape, or form is really quite perplexing to me. People say, well, you're sowing distrust in our institutions. No, that distrust already exists, as I just explained. What we're doing is we are just trying to prove whether it's good or whether it's bad, right? Either way, I'm fine with either result. It will end the debate. If the results come back perfect, then awesome. If they come back almost perfect, that's cool too. But if they are totally wrong, then we can sort through some problems. But this will end the debate on many fronts, and this is why it should be supported, and this is why people should be willing to help in this process. Now, we're doing some of the back programming right now, the back end stuff, but we will have a home page where people can go and donate if they'd like. We're setting up a 501c3 just to operate this particular time. Hopefully, we can adjust the process, the election process for the next cycle in the event that I'm able to garnish ample amount of influence there. But if not, then we'll stick around and we'll keep doing the verify vote to ensure that we can keep it all honest and we won't have any issues there. And that whether you like that idea or you don't, the fact of the matter is there's nothing wrong with verification. It happens in every facet of our lives. If you want a job, you have to provide a resume. If you want to go to school, you have to provide your transcripts. If you your test scores. If you want to buy a house, you provide your income and your income statements and your check stubs and all these different things. Proof is required for basically everything we do that has significance in our lives. And yet, when it comes to electing an official, we get some people kicking and screaming at the idea of someone wanting to verify that. I've made some posts to X recently, and I have had some pushback from some people thinking that it's silly that we would want to take a picture of our vote and store it in a database. And it's not silly at all. Everyone should be for this. It will prove one way or the other that things are good or things are bad, or things are really close to good. Either way, it'll be a great sample size. Hopefully it's more than a sample size, but it'll be a great way to show where we stand in our election process. And it will be ample amount of evidence, not only to take to court, but also to provide to legislatures to show them that things either need to change or maybe things are perfect. I highly, highly doubt it's perfect, as I just described. It's so easy to trip up the system. But, we'll see. We'll see what happens. So from there, I just want to talk a little bit about Phil Lyman here real quick. He's been getting a little bit of persecution because he has sought these different remedies via the court, particularly the Supreme Court. He basically is utilizing a bill, a Senate bill, that says that you have to have a certain number of, you're supposed to go through the convention system. Again, another issue I have with this whole thing, right? I don't have a convention. My convention as an unaffiliate is myself, right? And the only way I can get on the ballot is if I hire a company or I go around and collect 1,000 signatures per county throughout the entire state, right? Which is not, it's not a tenable task unless I have ample volunteers, which I don't have an organization for. So first of all, the only way you get on there is if you are able to get enough support from your convention and they vote you in, or you have to get 1,000 signatures per county in the entire state in order to get on the ballot, which seems completely ridiculous. It seems it's super impossible. right? Now, I'm not opposed to having some level of a few hurdles that you need to cross in order to make it onto the ballot. I'm fine with that. The problem I have is that they've made that so impossible to have anybody else on the ballot unless you have a party that it's pretty ridiculous, and I don't even know if that's really a thing for independents, or I believe there's a Utah party. I can't remember what they're called, but to get them on the ballot, it really is very difficult, and it only benefits really the Republicans and the Democrats, which is wrong. I mean, it's frankly wrong. I mean, particularly when you review the way the founding fathers set up the United States, is that anyone that wants to run for public office should be given that opportunity. And I'm able, obviously, to run for public office, but as a write-in. So the only way that people know my name is if I'm able to reach them, not if my name is on the ballot. And that's what's weird. That's what's wrong. But anyway, Phil has been arguing that he wants to access those signatures. He wants to see if those signatures are legitimate. And this is not the part that I don't understand is people say, well, what about privacy? What about the privacy? I don't think there's been any proposal to take those signatures and publish them across all of social media or anywhere else, right? If we're talking about a simple audit, that's a matter of people, a handful of folks going in, reviewing this information, and seeing if it's valid, right? We're not talking about plastering people's names all over the world to make sure that they feel bad that they supported Cox or whatever by obtaining their signature. I don't think anybody actually believes something like that would happen. It's a basic process that they can use in order to determine whether or not Cox can legitimately be on the ballot. Now, again, I disagree with this process. I don't think that you should have to acquire so many of those signatures. It's too much. But I also don't agree with I don't agree with the convention system either. That a handful of people, basically like super delegates almost, get to determine whether or not you are going to be on the ballot. That is a choice for the people, and there should be a venue by which that can happen, but it doesn't exist. And that's why when you look at the bracket system that I propose, where you go head to head with a candidate until basically like March Madness, and you go all the way until the finals, where you compete against one other person for the governorship or whatever it may be. And there are certain regulations associated with the amount of media attention you can get, and that you can't accept any money and all that sort of thing. And so that really would be the only way that would happen, and that's how you could really get the right person. At least you'd be serving the will of the people rather than forcing them into two separate choices, Democrat or Republican. And that's the only way people think. They all think that it's entirely a binary decision, and it's not. I don't think I voted for any of the major candidates in the election. Well, actually, in a governor's election, or in the presidency of the United States. I usually end up voting for some third party, those that align closest to my values. Now, you're not going to get the perfect person, right? But you want to strive to elect the person that is closest. And the problem is you have all these dissenting voices that say, if you vote for the third party, then that's a vote against, so-and-so, or, whatever, or against the Republicans, or against the Democrats, or whatever it is. And when in reality, that's just a talking point to drive you into their arms. This is wrong. That is wrong. We should, but I also understand the idea that if you've got too many candidates, and kind of like Justin Trudeau, right, where he received something like 20% of the vote because they had too many candidates in that process, then how on earth are you going to be able to, how can you get behind a candidate that only has 20% of the support, 20% of the vote of the United States or of the state or whatever it is? There has to be a way in which you can whittle that down, and that's why I proposed the bracket system. And so it's pretty simple, and it's straightforward, and it gives everybody the opportunity and everyone on the level playing field. And I don't understand why that would be opposed either. The only reason you would oppose that is because the Republicans and Democrats are so used to having so much power that they don't want to share. And if there's a way that you can stop that corruption, then you can. And if people look, and I know that many of you are members of the church that live in the state of Utah, what is so perplexing to me is that throughout the entire Book of Mormon, particularly Ether 8, but I mean throughout the Book of Mormon, they talk about secret combinations. They talk about secret combinations all the time and how they will destroy the United States. They'll destroy the Promised Land. And President Benson was an advocate to ensure that everybody understood what was happening. I mean, he recommended books that were directly associated with kind of conspiracy, people would view as conspiratorial. But he was actually in the cabinet of Eisenhower as the Secretary of Agriculture, and he had ample amount of information, and he tried to share as much as he could to help everyone understand the corruption that did exist in the United States and the corruption that exists across all of government. And so when you see people say, oh, that's just conspiracy, oh, no, our institutions are fine, no, then you're not reading your scriptures. And if you are, you're not understanding them. And I don't mean to be, I don't mean to be a meanie or something, but that's the reality, is the only way in which we are able to recognize the truth is if we're willing to see the truth. And that has been amply described in the Book of Mormon, that secret combinations are going to take over this country, and that's the equivalent to corruption. The only way you remove corruption is by eliminating parties, and as I've mentioned, it's the lambasted approach, or lamb-ted, right? We have to eliminate professional lobbying. We have to create an accountability system, which I propose in my book. We have to account for all the money that goes through the system, and I didn't propose this specifically in the book, but later on I've kind of realized we could probably do a kind of a jury style system where we select accounting firms and CPAs and that sort of thing, that they have to audit some particular this or that. What am I trying to say? Some department within the government, and then they provide those results, which would be as unbiased as possible, is what we would be going for. That's why we would select them like we would select a jury. And then we move on to the bracket system, which I've already described. And then you have term limits, which are also necessary. I'm not talking about term limits specifically for one office. I'm talking about term limits across all of government. So if you look at Cox and even Lyman, they've actually served in government for a number of years. I'm certain that Cox has served for decades, but I'm not sure exactly how much Lyman has served. I know that he was a rep, and then he was actually a county commissioner, but I don't know how long he actually served. And so the idea would be is that if you want to serve in these capacities, then there is a limit on that time, and that has to be a finite amount, so that you can't just continue to serve. And the same thing exists for those that are unelected bureaucrats. Right? And my proposal is 8 years for the elected and 10 years for the unelected, just so that there's some level of carryover so that people aren't, totally whitewashed into office. But not that that's a bad thing, honestly. I think sometimes when you are whitewashed into something, you can come up with some better results. But at least there's some sort of support there when someone else goes in there. And so that is the process in which, and then I forgot not just terms, and the last two is eliminate parties and then eliminate decadence. And, you see that sort of thing happening all the time, is that rules for thee and not for me, and that happens throughout government all the time. You've got, Spencer Cox, he lives in a mansion, the governor's mansion. He's treated to many, many fine things, galas. He attends many basketball games. I'm sure he's able to make it to football games. I'm sure he gets a lot of special invites from many, many quote unquote important people, and he's not flipping the bill on that. And that's wrong. If you want to go to a Jazz game, you got to pay for that Jazz game. If you want to live in a mansion, you got to pay for that mansion. You don't get special treatment just because you're a member of the government. And that's the problem right now. What we've done is we've created a political aristocracy, and they are able to do pretty much whatever they want. I mean, if you look back, I don't know if anyone's ever read Count of Monte Cristo, but my favorite entertainment book anyway, and it describes the privileges that many of the elites get to receive versus those that are peasants, right? If you are, and this you can see that across multiple things, particularly when you look at what's that other show? Anyway, a famous movie with a Englishman that goes around and saves a bunch of French people while the guillotine's dropping and everything else. Scarlet Pimpernel, there you go. And he goes around and you see the privileges that they're enjoying versus those that are peasants, right? And you can see that in the pauper, the Prince of the Pauper and everything else, where if you are someone of quote unquote importance, then you get certain privileges over that of those that are unimportant. And this is something that has to end. This can't continue to persist. And if we don't try and do something and we don't make something happen, then we're going to be in a really tough spot. And so, I mean, and I want to take the time real quick and just sort of reveal my hopes. People might listen and say, well, Matt, how on earth are you actually going to win? And that is a great, great question. I've thought the same thing myself, and I will run until the end, all the way to November, no matter what, right? No matter if it looks like the problem is I haven't received massive amounts of money. I'm unable to advertise my name very well. The majority of what's happened has come from my own pocket and my own efforts. And I'm okay with that because I feel like this is a way in which I've been able to grow closer to God and do as He's asked me to do. But I hope if anyone that is listening has any influence with Phil Lyman, if he and I could partner up, not necessarily as running mates or anything else like that, but if he can help in the process of promoting Verify Vote in the event that he doesn't win his Supreme Court case, which I think is unlikely. But if he doesn't win and he runs as a write-in, it is going to be crucial that he utilizes the Verify Vote process to ensure that everything goes according to plan. If he has issues, that's the one thing that I've never understood. Those that have called question onto the elections and the election process, this is a serious problem. It's a serious, serious problem, but yet they have no way to mitigate it, right? Nothing in the state of Utah has changed in terms of electing officials since 2020. Nothing. It's the same thing pretty much across all the United States, save a couple of states that won't be able to do mail-in ballots like they did prior to. But the state of Utah's always done mail-in ballots. They've always, not always, but they've done mail-in ballots for a very long time. And these sorts of things exist now, and there's nothing we can do to prevent that from this upcoming election. And I truly believe, as many have stated, that this is the most important election of our lifetime. And even though I think it's obvious that Donald Trump will win, I do not believe he's actually going to take office. I can get into that another time, but I don't believe he'll take office. And I think the same thing is going to take place here. If Phil Lyman doesn't run as a write-in candidate and doesn't encourage vvote.org, Verify Vote, and the same thing will happen to him. They will prevent him from being able to run. Now, people might believe that's conspiratorial, and that's fine. You can believe that if you'd like. This is what I believe. But if you actually want to prove me wrong, or you want to prove me right, then it's imperative that you go to vvote.org, vvote.org, and verify your vote when you receive your ballot. Because that will it'll either prove that the election process is perfect, or it'll prove that it's not. And either way, we have evidence to support either case. And in the event that I believe, if Phil Lyman decides to run as a write-in, and he should, and he utilizes this system, he will be the next governor of the state of Utah. And I know that I'm running for write-in myself, but let's face it, he is the one that has the momentum. He's the one that has the reach. And if he can utilize that for good, and I believe he's probably the best option for that, I'll still vote for myself unless I'm on his ticket. But, I guess I would still vote for myself if I'm on his ticket. I'm not necessarily pseudo-endorsing him, but I think he's the best option for us to ensure that he doesn't prevent the evil that will persist if he's not elected. And I think that's largely because of what's going to happen at the federal level, and it's going to leak down into the states, and it's going to cause a huge amount of suffering and evil and everything else to go about on the people. And if we're able to actually wield the 10th Amendment and we have the right people in the right places, it will ensure that we can actually win this thing. And we can shield Utahns from the worst of it. Now, we can't prevent all of it, but we can do our best to protect them. And there you go. I mean, there's a lot of heartfelt effort and study that has gone into those varying statements, and I hope that you'll take them seriously and you'll take the time to verify your vote. I'll indicate when the home page is all up and running, where you can make a donation to help in that process. It's a costly process to program, and the verification process is actually fairly expensive too. So if you can help, that would be helpful, of course. Have a good one, and talk to you soon.